The factory fire in Bangladesh last month that killed 1,000 workers got some people to thinking. Where are my clothes made and under what conditions? It's a concern one Cambridge store has had for years.
I believe workers should be paid living wages, like more than minimum wage, or at least enough to make a decent living by the standards of their country.
Natasha Mogilevskaya has been a sales clerk at Pseudo Shoes for 2 years and says people who shop there care about where products are manufactured.
Every now and then people will come in and they will ask, for example, is this made in China, or do you know where the shoe was made? A lot of people don't know, though, that sweatshops today are not really in China. They're in Pakistan, Bangladesh, India.
Maddie Conway just spent $109 on a pair of black flats at Pseudo Shoes, which sells no animal products at all. She says the shoes are comfortable and have good support, but that's not the only reason she shops there.
It's definitely important to me also, how those are made, where they come from.
Sebastian Diaz and his wife shop here because they want to support manufacturers who, at the very least, do no harm.
One of the issues with consumerism in the United States, well, everywhere, is that there's no correlation between what you purchase and what the impact it has in the environment.
Back in Bangladesh, there are efforts to get manufacturers from all over the world to sign an accord to ensure fire and building safety in that country. So far, only 2 major American firms have signed on. And with me now is Scott Fitzsimmons, who owns Pseudo Shoes, and Gianna Eckhart, our professor of marketing at Suffolk University. Welcome.
Thank you.
Well, so Scott, how do you know where your stuff is made? I mean, they can tell you where it's made, but how do you know?
Well, finding out where it's made is very straightforward when you're talking about an actual vegan brand. When you're talking about a company that maybe consists of 7 to 10 people, and they're made in a small warehouse in China, factory in Italy, or in Portugal, or in England. You have to ask a few more questions when a brand makes its shoes in China. And how do you know for sure?
Yeah.
You don't know for sure, but what you can do is select your brands according to their record, according to their history. You take brands like Patagonia, who are very transparent. They talk about where their shoes are made. They supply photographs. But how do you know for sure? It's like anything. It requires a degree of transparency that doesn't exist. But you can take a brand that has a bad track record, like Asics, for example, and you can say, we know that they have a history of manipulating factories, of underpaying workers, of having very lax safety standards in the factory. There was a factory actually collapsed just about a month and a half ago in Cambodia, an Asics factory.
Wow.
And you can judge by this history whether you want to carry this brand or not.
Well, Jenna, would that make a difference to people, and would it change any kind of behavior, do you think, in Bangladesh if people started buying product based on how they feel the workers are being treated in some of these countries?
I think the issue with the factories, what happened in the factories in Bangladesh, is more of a governmental enforcement issue. So what I mean by that is, if there started to be more consumer demand for the types of products that Scott carries at his store, it wouldn't necessarily put pressure on the major players who are a part of those factories. So, for example, the Walmarts, the Targets, the Gaps of the world. And I think that there needs to be governmental oversight to really ensure that factories are...
Whose government?
Well, in particular with Bangladesh, that was a great question, because the government there is not equipped to enforce that type of thing. So people were talking about having U.S. legislation that would apply to U.S. manufacturers, but I would highly doubt that would ever be passed.
That's the reason that the sweatshops have moved out of China. They don't. Yes. I mean, the China factories are still not ideal in a lot of ways, but the real sweatshops don't exist in China anymore. They exist in Cambodia, in Pakistan, and in Bangladesh.
Is that because of American pressure?
No, it's because Chinese actually have a real infrastructure, and they can create a product that has value now, and they're demanding higher wages, and the factories are a little bit more expensive, and so a lot of corporations are just finding the cheapest route, and that takes them to a country like Janice suggested has less of an ability to have government oversight. So these factories that have no safety standards whatsoever can continue to operate.
Jenna, are people willing to pay more for a product where people aren't being abused?
I think if you're talking about the mass market, the answer is no. I think there'll always be niche markets who will shop at stores that carry vegan products, for example, but the research that I've been doing for over 10 years that's come out in my recent book, The Myth of the Ethical Consumer, shows clearly that if you're talking about the average person who wants to get something stylish but not pay too much money, they will continue to shop at the Targets and the Walmarts of the world. And while they'll be outraged when they see images on TV of things like what happened last month in Bangladesh, the actuality of it having an impact on their long-term behavior is small.
By the way, is union label meaningful in this day and age? Does it mean anything when it says
I think
union
sound
label?
bites mean a lot to people. And saying that something is manufactured in a union factory means a lot to people, but it doesn't have to be a union factory to be responsibly made. It's just one easy way of summing it up. I think, just to back up a second to what Jana was saying there, there is definitely an ethical consumer. The ethical consumer is maybe a small percentage of the popular American consumer group, but if there is a 5 or 10%, there are roughly 250,000 vegans, vegetarians in the Boston area. Those are people who have chosen a certain lifestyle. They will only purchase a certain type of product, and that's just that's a given for them.
So not only they will not eat animal products, they won't wear animal products.
Right.
Like your shoes.
That's sort of That's goes.
Is it cheaper, by the way? Or are vegan products cheaper?
Not cheaper at all.
Yeah, exactly.
No. Well, there are vinyl shoes,
Yeah.
which we don't carry because all kinds of environmental reasons, and also they're not very durable. But a good Italian microfiber, which will last just like leather, is not cheaper, especially if you're talking about a small brand who's only buying limited quantities of things. No, the shoes are a little bit more expensive.
Should the pressure be put on some of these big American companies, big department stores who carry certain labels where they know? I mean, would that be effective? Apparently, 2 companies have signed on to this agreement in Bangladesh.
None of them U.S. companies.
Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, they're all European.
They're all European.
In particular, fast fashion companies like H&M and Zara, for example. So what that pact does is the companies who have signed on to it are agreeing to fund some safety standards, and they will also be fined if there's violations in factories that they are subcontracting to. So the pact does have some teeth to it. But as Scott mentioned, U.S. companies have not signed on yet, and so I don't see it having a big impact in the clothing or shoes system at a mainstream level in this country.
Although some people are aware that the Gap and Walmart and a few other American brands have kept their distance, even though maybe they've been implicated in the most recent tragedy in Bangladesh. So there's awareness. And how long will that last? Who can say how long it will last? But there is awareness.
Are those companies ones that actually use those kind of workers as well?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
What happened to the good old-fashioned boycott, back in the 60s? It was always very effective.
Yeah. I know. I would just add to that I agree that there's a high level of awareness, but does awareness lead to an actual change in behavior? And for many reasons, the answer for a lot of people tends to be no. So Scott mentioned an issue of price. For a lot of people, in particular since 2008, although they share the same beliefs and they have raised awareness levels, they don't have the ability to necessarily change their purchase patterns. And there's a whole host of other things that come into the decision, like style, what brand are your peers wearing, that tend to swamp out people's ethical beliefs.
If someone will shop at H&M as opposed to Gap right now in the short term, that's a good thing, and that will have an effect. It's a question of whether you're going to have the follow-through. You're in the same shopping mall, just go to the other side of the aisle.
All right, Scott Fitzsimmons and Jana Eckert, thank you so much.